Episode 3 of the Amazing Digital Circus is so good. It's easily my favorite so far. It's just a masterclass in writing, pacing, tone, character, and animation. Every scene is placed perfectly. Every story beat lasts just as long as it needs to. It's a perfect blend of horror, humor, and heart. The circus works as a very thinly veiled metaphor for our own often harsh reality, reflecting the hopeless feeling of being trapped by circumstances that you can't change, ones you may or may not have entered willingly, and the ways we cope with that lack of control, healthy and otherwise. And its success gives me hope for the future of indie animation. The fact that it's been so successful without a studio backing it, successful enough that Netflix approached them and asked to host the series on their platform. In a time where so many innovative and original ideas are snuffed out, and so many creators are robbed of the chance to tell the story they want to tell, it is fantastic to see Glitch and Gooseworks retain control of this story. Maybe this will change the way animation is produced going forward. Maybe it'll set a precedent for artists being able to fund their own stories. We can only hope. But for now, I want to deep dive into episode 3 and all the reasons I love it so much. The episode starts off with the characters the most relaxed we've seen them yet, just casually hanging out somewhere in the tent, filling time between adventures. Zooble actually participates in the conversation, and Gangle's totally at ease, just doodling to herself. But that peace is shattered as soon as Kane appears. He launches into the new adventure with his typical showman energy, only faltering when he realizes Zooble isn't there. Already we see the visuals setting up the darker tone for this episode. Throughout Kane's pitch, the lighting is much more moody and realistic, giving the scene a more grounded feel. Mildenhall Manor itself is rendered much more realistically than the locations we've seen before. It's a great, subtle way to set up for both the adventure and the more serious character moments. And what an adventure it is! It feels like a send-up to horror video gaming, with nods to Luigi's Mansion and Spoopy's House of Jump Scares. The adventure itself feels very Amnesia-like, from the setting to the lore delivery and the monster design. I love Kinger's gradual transition to lucidity. While Pomni is just looking to end the adventure as soon as possible, Kinger is the one taking in the environments. He's the one playing the tapes. It's so well done that by the time we get to the cellar, we've gone from Kinger actually seems to be paying attention to, oh, Kinger's actually a badass. And this is where the episode shows its strength in pacing. The cuts back and forth between Kinger and Pomni's adventure and the other characters come at exactly the right moments. Every time we hit a significant story point in the adventure, we take a moment to check in with the others. First with Kane and Zooble, and then with the rest on the easy adventure. There's great progression in the Zooble and Kane story, too. The first scene with them is strictly comedy, with Kane forcing Zooble into an unwanted therapy session. The poses and expressions are amazing in this scene. I love Kane raising an eyebrow here. The return of his eyelashes and the way his tongue sticks out when he says Zooble's name. His wackiness is on full display, which makes the wham shot we get in their next scene that much more effectively devastating. And speaking of devastating, Zooble, my beloved! I loved this insight into their character. It's the first time we've seen them express any kind of vulnerability, and their conflict is a clear metaphor for body dysmorphia. I love when dialogue is very deliberately given to a specific character. Like at the end of How to Train Your Dragon, it's Gobber, the character missing 2 limbs, who observes that Toothless was only able to save most of Hiccup. Similarly, Zooble welcoming Pomni by drawing attention not only to the circus itself, but the fact that it assigns each player a new body carries that much more weight when you realize how uncomfortable Zooble is with their own body. Of course they would think to point that out, because it's such a huge source of stress for them. The adventure itself starts strong, with beautifully rendered nightmare versions of all the characters. Lizzie Freeman's delivery of Pomni's terrified reaction is gold. Kinger seems so unusually focused right from the start. I wondered if this adventure was going to be a kind of reflection on his own backstory. I don't think it was, but there's definitely a parallel to be drawn between Kinger and the Baron, both losing their wives and their sanity, as well as the sense of helplessness at not being able to protect someone you care about. The lore tapes have a very indie horror feel. You can easily imagine a game from the early 2010s with this kind of setting, story, and lore delivery method. And the exposition is flawless. The The Baron's first message cuts off just abruptly enough to make you think, wait, was that it? While setting up an ominous feeling of unease. The second tape is placed just as perfectly. I love this shot of Kinger looking back into the trophy room. Like, imagine playing this as a game and getting to the warning not to take your eyes off the head, only to look up and see that the head is gone. Would that not be the most oh shit moment? That is some brilliant lore placement. There's also some nice foreshadowing in the study. When we get a shot of the bookshelf, one of the spines on the book says Angels, and another says Lovecraft. And I love the gag with Pomni and Kinger's eyes in the dark. I love that it's hand-drawn. I love this slow blink from Kinger. So much of both of their personalities shines through here. And then we get a great moment of the episode expertly blending horror and humor. The creature itself is horrifying, but Kinger's reaction to it is hilarious. Kinger losing himself in the lights from the creature's mouth is funny, but it also has a kind of unsettlingly open-ended sense of fear. It makes you wonder, what exactly is he seeing in this moment? And the answer we get is absolutely heartbreaking. There's a great bit of posing at the end of this segment. Kevin Temmer has a video on his TikTok where he discusses the challenge of posing the characters in creative ways to make sure their expressions would read clearly through the metal grate. Also, this transition is amazing.
I do not use my adventures to torture my guests!
Back with Kane and Zubul, we get our insight into Zubul's character, as well as Kane's inability to deal with it in any meaningful way. The tragedy of Kane's character is that he does want his guests to be happy. He was created to amuse and entertain, and he does try to listen to what the players are asking for and incorporate that into the adventures. In her Glitch interview, Gooseworks was asked if Kane is a villain, and she responded that Kane doesn't mean harm, but he causes harm, which to me is way more interesting than if he was just straight up evil. His limitations as an AI mean he isn't capable of understanding the complexity of the human player's emotions and problems. He wants them to be happy, and he understands there are things that would make them happy. He just doesn't understand why they have those needs. It's like the exit door in the first episode. He knows the players have been wanting there to be an exit, but he doesn't understand that what they really want is an exit to the program itself, not just the circus. So when Zubul tells him point blank that his adventures suck and no one likes them, it cuts Kane to the core. To think that the one thing he was programmed to do is something he can't even do right sends him spiraling. As he panics, the environment around them flickers and glitches, which adds yet another layer of horror to the circus. It seems the players don't just have to worry about their own sanity, but their hosts as well. Zubul is able to snap him out of it fairly easily, but it's another great reminder of how precarious their situation is. When we check back in with Pomni and Kinger, Kinger is even more lucid. When he plays the third and final tape, not only is he listening, but he looks genuinely affected by the story. He's the one to suggest taking the gun, and he's the one to protect Pomni when the creature arrives. And again, we get this episode's great balance of horror and comedy. Not only does Pomni's genre savvy worry that the corpse will come alive lead to a hilarious gag, "Please don't come alive."
Okay, I won't.
Kinger's reaction to the monster actually being an angel is the stuff of memes. I love that he actually takes the time to question how a fictional dead character would be able to record something after being dragged down to hell, right before he and Pomni are dragged down themselves. A great, creepy visual made so much worse by just how hard Pomni struggles to break free. At this point, we get our last breather before the big emotional climax. I love that the easy adventure is literally just the players having tea with Mrs. Mildenhall. I also love that no explanation is given for how Jax ended up bound and gagged in a kiddie wagon. No context needed, it's honestly much funnier that way. This leads us to the last scene in Pomni and Kinger's adventure, the emotional height of the episode. At this point, Kinger is fully in control, and the animation and voice acting shift to reflect that. His movements are slow and intentional, and his voice is steady and grounded. He's cautious and strategic, stopping Pomni from running ahead and coming up with a way to scope out the hallway. And when Pomni, desperate to escape, charges down the hall anyway, we get the scariest visual of the episode. Pomni's possession is so well done. It's deeply unsettling in the way her limbs twist and bend unnaturally before her eyes light up and a slasher smile takes over her face. It looks like a genuinely uncomfortable experience. It's no wonder she's so visibly shaken when it's over. And this scene, this gut wrenching scene, Sean Chipluck turns in an incredible performance as Kinger, bringing a new pathos to the character, with the animation perfectly supporting his delivery. If the circus is a metaphor for life itself, Kinger may as well be addressing the audience directly here.
I know how it can feel in this circus. Sometimes it all just feels pointless. But it's not.
I've watched this episode several times now. It makes me cry every time. It's hard to even write about it. It is just a fantastic moment between these characters that encapsulates the themes of the show beautifully. And to talk about it too much would do it a disservice, I think. The message that life is hard, but that none of us ever have to face it alone is so beautiful and so needed. The way Kinger tells Pomni she is strong enough to get through this guts me. And taking her hand and lifting her to her feet, they take a deep breath and start the long walk to freedom. And of course Kinger glows. Of course he does. He is the light in the darkness, Pomni's guiding force when things are bleak. I love when throwaway lines or gags come back and take on devastating new meaning, and Kinger glowing delivers on that so well. There's a great Tumblr post about Kinger's acceptance of the harsher realities of life possibly being what shields him from fully abstracting. He doesn't deny the darkness, he embraces it, and that lets him keep his hope alive. I feel like there's also a metaphor in there for overstimulation. The circus is all bright lights and loud noises. When it's dark and quiet, Kinger can think straight. There's such a sense of catharsis to this moment. When Kinger and Pomni emerge from the stairwell, it feels like we can breathe a sigh of relief. They're okay. What they went through was hard and scary, but they made it through. Together. It's honestly kind of heartbreaking to watch Kinger revert back to obliviousness so quickly. And then Pomni takes the kindness Kinger showed her and makes her first real attempt at connection with another player. Episode 1 introduced Pomni to the overwhelming world of the circus and landed her in a reality that is difficult to come to terms with. She can't connect with any of the other players at this point because her own anxiety is so high. In episode 2, Pomni makes an effort to connect, but it's with Gummy Goo, an NPC. Her line to him of, "I could really use a friend," is odd considering how earnestly Ragatha is trying to bond with her. But it makes sense. It's often easier to connect with fiction than reality. Fictional characters can't hurt us, they can't leave us. We control the narrative. But relationships aren't about control. Genuine connection with others is hard and can be scary, but we need it, and it's worth the effort. Episode 2 ends with Pomni accepting that she does have people who care about her, and at the end of episode 3, she takes the first step to reach out and reciprocate that connection. Also, I know we're all excited to learn more about Jax, but how much do you want to bet Ragatha's backstory is going to be the one that destroys us all? And this episode isn't done showing off the strength of its pacing. Pomni's heartfelt moment with Ragatha is the perfect falling action after the episode's emotional high, and with that catharsis out of the way, we can ease back into the wacky nature of the circus. And this is executed perfectly, with Gangle shyly asking if they remembered to get her comedy mask. The timing of the pause between the question and Kinger's F-bomb is flawless.
Did you remember to get my comedy mask?
And with that, the spell is broken. The episode delivers one last big laugh by subverting our expectations. When we cut back to the circus, Kane and Zubul have switched places, Zubul now acting as Kane's therapist as he rambles nonsensically. And we get one final, simple, quiet moment to close out the episode.
It wasn't that bad, actually.
Before we end, I just wanted to point out some of my favorite details in the animation that wouldn't really fit anywhere else. Kinger's eyes sticking to the ground as he sits up is a fantastic touch. Every pose Kane strikes during the therapy session is gold. I love how he clacks his teeth together when he turns away from Zubul in a huff. Pomni's guarded posture relaxing as Kinger makes her feel better is a great bit of character animation. And I love how Ragatha's mouth is animated almost to look like a crayon drawing. It gives her character a really unique feel. This episode is an easy 10 out of 10 in animation. The Amazing Digital Circus is a show about existential horror, feeling trapped by your circumstances, and still finding joy with the people you care about. Life is hard, that's just how it is. So much in the world is beyond our control. So often we find ourselves in situations that we wish we could change, but just can't. And it's tempting to give in to helplessness and despair. But we have no reason to despair if we have people who truly care about us. We may all be in a terrible situation, but we're in it together. And that makes all the difference. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think of the Amazing Digital Circus and what you're hoping to see from the series going forward. And as always, I'm eternally optimistic, and I'll catch you guys later.